Last time, we arrived on the Clipper in Australia. We saw how this part of the world is burdened by severe droughts and searing heat waves. But we also saw the surprising ways in which the Australians have found solutions to these problems. Today, we take a closer look at some of the other solutions that scientists are offering here to prevent the extinction of certain species. After all, Australia is the land of the future, the country where everything seems possible. According to the Australians, if nature won't cooperate, then why not take control? And if, for example, through genetic manipulation, you still don't succeed in creating the perfect crop, human or animal, then why not just create one? In September 2009, I left Plymouth in England to embark on a great adventure. I was invited to set sail with the Clipper Stad Amsterdam and make the same journey that the young naturalist Charles Darwin undertook 179 years ago. The Beagle's circumnavigation of the Earth is the most important journey ever made, far more important than man's voyage to the moon. And I will be repeating this journey together with Darwin's great-great-granddaughter, Sarah. It's a chance of several lifetimes. Australia, the land of the future. Darwin would not have believed it. He was pessimistic about the possibilities of this arid landscape. And how could he have imagined that this country in particular would become the leader in the enhancement of life through genetic modification techniques? Australians did so precisely because of the difficult circumstances they faced. Before our ship left Sydney to sail to the south, Sarah disembarked to stay here and find out more about this field of science, genetics.
Hi.
Because here in Australia, they happily practice techniques that are forbidden everywhere else. What consequences does that have for the process of evolution by natural selection? En route, Sarah is confronted with genetic modification taking place in Australia. Something peculiar is going on in this field.
We get the donor cow and we take the embryos out of the donors and then we implant them in the Anguses and then they just calve them as normal calves. So that's the Friesians out of the Anguses, the embryos, recips. It's just a good way of getting more heifer calves and bulls, but mainly heifers, without using your milking herd. You just use Anguses.
In fact, genetics is nothing more than normal farming techniques with added ingenuity. For 10,000 years, farmers have been giving the process of evolution by natural selection a helping hand. As Darwin called it, the process of evolution by domestic selection. In other words, they selected the traits they wanted in their plants and animals by allowing only the choice breeds to mate.
This one's a crossbred, so this will be a Jersey and a Friesian cross, which gives you hybrid vigour, which is actually better than a pure Friesian. And we look at the kilograms of protein, the kilograms of butter fat he gives, and then we also look at other things with daughter fertility and survival. And then we have milking speed, temperament, likeability, which is the farmers score those sort of things. The leaderage. My grandfather would have done it on eyesight, where we do it all on genetic evaluation now. Hopefully in the next 12 months, 6 to 12 months, we'll have to take a DNA snippet of a cow and we'll know hopefully how good that calf is at a week's of age.
Here in Australia, they're perhaps the most sophisticated plant and animal breeding schemes in the world. But we have to remember that now it's a great deal more sophisticated, predictable, a lot of mathematics comes into play, and that's quite different from the background that Darwin was thinking about, even when he's writing about domestic selection, the basis for his natural selection. He had no idea what was actually happening with genetics. As the monk Gregor Mendel discovered, the units of genetics are not fluids, as Darwin thought, but particles. He really hung in there, Mendel. He focused on one plant, the ordinary garden pea, and he remorselessly tracked down the productions of generations when he interbred them. Now, from here on, it gets a bit mathematical. I can't do mathematics. I've never been able to work out his sequence of generations, but together it was just proved right in every single application ever of Mendel and Darwin combined. In Australia, living on a farm has become a lot easier because of Darwin and Mendel. This has nothing to do with natural selection. Where does all this super sperm from all these super bulls that unknowingly have thousands of descendants walking around on the Australian countryside come from?
We got up really early this morning and saw a beautiful sunrise over Melbourne, and we've come here to visit this company that collects and distributes semen collected from these bulls and sells it all over Australia. And they're specifically selected for certain characteristics and tested using genetics.
They're basically trying to get the bull sexually aroused.
Right.
And the boys know the bulls pretty well.
Yeah, of course.
And each individual bull and what they like and what they don't like, so they know which teasers work best with which bulls, because they do have preferences.
Yeah. She's going to watch.
So he's going to watch what happens here. So
he's mounting a male.
He's mounting a male, yes.
Right.
We only actually have males, castrated males on the centre that we use for teasers. We have had cows in the past, but the bulls don't tend to differentiate a lot.
Oh, really? So they do it, they're not doing it on pheromones and scent then?
No, it's very much a visual thing for the bull, so that they can get stimulated by the activity
So
of
it's
the
sort
other
of a
bulls.
floor show.
Yeah, not one I'd pay money to go and see, but Jim's leading the teaser. And so Arana's our top profit-rated bull.
Right.
So that's based on the profitability of his daughters. Brendan's come in with the artificial vagina and he knows exactly what's going to happen.
So Brendan and his artificial vagina are a bit of a turn on as well.
Very much so.
That's as quick as that.
That's as quick
done.
as that. That's done.
Right.
Yep. A very quick process.
Yeah.
And it's also seeing that artificial vagina. They recognise that as a very much part of the process.
Because you can see him watch
Brent,
Brendan
can we
as he walks across.
Can we have a look, mate? So there we go.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we get? About
So is that a good
about
collection?
6 mils?
500 or 600 doses out of that.
5 or...
500 or 600?
600.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. My goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is our semen storage area in here, and we can have a look at some semen in storage. And we can see in the vat all the different coloured straws which designate different breeds of cattle.
What we can do nowadays with gene marker analysis is determine the genetic merit of a bull,
So you take some DNA.
take some
have that
DNA, assay its gene markers.
Right.
It's a very simple test nowadays.
Yep.
It takes about 3 weeks. And not only will it be applied to dairy cattle, but it'll be applied to beef cattle, to sheep, pigs and poultry, and obviously also plant species as well.
So we're trying to tailor the cow to that environment, which doesn't mean that that's the only place that she'll perform well, but she's more geared to our type of production system.
Can the principle of selection, which we have seen is so potent in the hands of man, apply in nature? I think we shall see that it can act most effectually. Let it be borne in mind in what an endless number of strange peculiarities our domestic productions, and in a lesser degree those under nature, vary, and how strong the hereditary tendency is. Under domestication, it may be truly said that the whole organisation becomes in some degree plastic. Let it be borne in mind how infinitely complex and close-fitting are the mutual relations of all organic beings to each other and to their physical conditions of life. In Melbourne, the philosopher Daniel Dennett joins us on board the Clipper. Just in time for me to ask him what he thinks of the ethics, of the rights and the wrongs of all this.
Let's separate out the issue of whether it's, unnatural and we shouldn't tamper with nature. That's just preposterous. Everything you eat, every bit of clothing you wear is tampered. You could not survive on an ungenetically modified diet. You couldn't live without it. The only difference is now we can do the modification a lot faster and more effectively, and much more effectively and much safer.
So Europeans are being unnecessarily difficult, according to Dennett. We always see problems, and that is in stark contrast to the mentality that people have here, down under. Australia is the place where everybody greets you with a friendly, "No worries, mate." And that's why they breed cows that can very nearly produce instant milk powder. No worries. And that's why, besides animals, they also like to tamper with humans here. While we are moving on, Sarah is still in Sydney.
Every couple planning a family hopes for a healthy baby. But for some couples, the risk of having a baby with a genetic disorder such as cystic fibrosis, Down syndrome or Huntington disease is much higher until now. If you and your partner are concerned about your baby being born with a genetic disorder, there are screening options available even before getting pregnant.
Well, I'm looking at the website for a clinic called the Sydney IVF in preparation for a visit tomorrow. There's a list on this website of about 130 inherited diseases, most of which, to be honest, I haven't actually even heard of. Some of which are life-limiting and very, very serious. In other words, individuals would have suboptimal life and die young. But some of these appear to be less serious.
Just imagine, the patient's parents, father and mother coming One of them, for example, say father is affected by Huntington disease. They know that and they decide to have offspring. They will come to us, to Sydney IVF, and the father will produce the sperm, the mother will produce the egg, and in the tube, because Sydney IVF, it's about producing babies from the tube. It's mixed in the dish, and you will create embryos, which you will keep for up to 5 days in culture. And after 5 days, what we will do, we will take a couple of cells from placenta, and those cells are tested using molecular technique. And what we will be able to do, if the patients will have, for example, 4 embryos, we can identify that embryo 1 and 3 is affected by Huntington disease, and those embryos will never be used for reproductive purposes. And the healthy embryos, which are not carrying the disease, will be used for embryo transfer, and hopefully it will end with pregnancy and baby which is not affected by Huntington disease.
Great.
Simple. It's quite interesting that you are having those little incubators. It looks like little hives, and it's really futuristic. Yeah? And really you are having in each of those incubators individual patients' embryos.
Incredible, yes.
And
I mean, there's a future human being inside here.
yeah,
Potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah.
You got very good control about the environment. You make sure that the embryos are happy and growing well, and it's very good technology.
Play the Mozart at night.
Well, if indeed applied DNA techniques can prevent us from experiencing grief, for instance, and can give us perfect children, then why not just enjoy our self-made good fortune? Or is it not that simple?
If it starts to become the norm for prospective parents to shop around for the right genome for their children, this will have a dramatic effect on the human gene pool. It creates too much uniformity. It means that the gene pool is confined, restricted, lots of sources of variation, which might turn out to be the key to important developments later, removed. If we get genomes too closely tinkered with by prospective parents, and in a way, who can blame them?
For the last 150,000 years, at least, we've been genetically manipulating ourselves and our animals. Darwin, with his studies of pigeons and his great plant experiments, was constantly trying to manipulate nature. After all, the motto of evolution by domestic selection is adapt or die. But why mess about with half measures? Why tinker with the body we have inherited from evolution by natural selection? Why not go right ahead and create the ideal human form? Daniel Dennett wrote a pioneering book called Darwin's Dangerous Idea, in which he concludes that humans are composed of minuscule robots. Dennett has for a long time been involved with the development of artificial intelligence, where his robots are starting to show strong human traits.
The feeling was very real, because when you touched Cog's hand, it responded in a very animal way. It wasn't like touching the table, it was like shaking somebody's hand.
Dennett searches for the limits of the possible.
So are you going to be able to make your robots blush?
Oh, the technical side of making them blush or something that's like blushing, that's the easy part. The hard part is making them, as it were, mean it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to make our robot agents vulnerable, and so that they betray their failures just the way we can betray ours.
Here in Australia, a lot can be done unrestricted. But does that mean you can develop robots with typical human characteristics, such as empathy, and with emotions like sorrow, fear, or happiness?
Wow, wow. Ah, that is amazing. Whoops.
Can I make this move instead?
That is amazing. That is incredible.
The plan for Smokey is to bring him to life in 2020 and to explore what that means.
Right.
So he can be autonomous, you know, he's moving his arms all by himself. Ronnie is not there, you know, moving him, right? He's using a program to help control him. But we want to take this to the next level such that he can really have his own thoughts.
In the back of the bear, there is the heart shape. So it represents the heartbeat of the bear, and currently it's beating 60 beats per minute.
So that means he's not really having an emotional...
He's not have any emotional states. Yeah. So, and I I design in such a way that he likes a red color. So when it sees any red color, it will react.
Yes, you can see his head's moving.
Yes, it will try to see. And when he wants the ball, he will say something. So he wants the ball now. And if you look here, it's actually beating faster. The heart beating faster.
So what Ronnie's doing is linking his sensory information that's coming in with his internal model of himself.
Right.
Because one of the features we want him to develop is seeing his own body and knowing that that's him.
Yes.
The soccer player.
Like a baby,
yeah, very much like a baby. So we're thinking, you know, a robot that you would want to be autonomous and interacting with us and taking care of your grandmother and your children in your home should be aware of himself as an entity in his own right. You know, we live in a society, there are rules, there's a legal system, and robots, if we want to incorporate them into our society, need to understand what that means. So they need to be able to develop concepts.
A real humanoid robot should not simply be a performer, but himself make decisions based on his own experiences. But that requires a robot with brains.
What a brain is a future generator, an expectation generator. It has been designed by natural selection to take in and discriminate information from the environment, from your life, from what you've experienced, and to extract from that, to distill from that anticipations of what's going to happen next. Every bit of look ahead that any brain has to be the product of sampling the past in order to find a trajectory to project into the future.
into my eyes.
Hello, robot.
Do I know you?
The development of robots is obviously still in its infancy. Robot builders try to capture baby behavior in computer models, imitating the natural evolution that has driven the development of life for millions and millions of years.
People often wonder how evolution can be an algorithmic process when it involves randomness. Evolution, which is completely stupid, doesn't know a thing, it makes a gazillion guesses. It says, well, let's try this. And it makes a whole lot of offspring, generation after generation, dumb, lucky, random guesses, corrections, corrections, guess, correct, guess, correct, guess, correct. And that's how 7, and this is a 6 or a 7.
The real human robot is still a while away. Perhaps because we'd like to stay in control for the time being. Even though robots would probably be better masters of the universe. We've just sailed very fast across the Great Australian Bight between 12 and 13 knots. And here we are in Fremantle on the west coast of Australia, safely moored. And it's a good feeling. In 1629, the Batavia, a Dutch East India Company ship, ran into the reefs of the West Australian coast. Now, more than 400 years later, increasing evidence suggests that this event led to more than just a shipwreck. This is a very small section of the Batavia's stern. She hit the coast of Australia full on, probably around 15 knots. What happened to the Dutch sailors? Did they starve to death, or did they mingle with the local population? Did they fall in love with the beautiful young black Aboriginal girls? After all, they had been at sea for 8 months, just like us. Here on these deceptive reefs, the Batavia stranded. The imprint of the hull of the ship can still be seen in the sand. Most of the crew were able to save themselves on the plain rocky islands. A group of 25 men mutinied, but the mutiny was put down, and most of the mutineers were hanged. 2 mutineers were pardoned the death sentence, but marooned ashore. These were the first Dutch inhabitants of Australia.
How are you doing, Sarah Darwin? What's
Nice
your
to
name?
meet you.
Rupert?
I'm Rupert Gerritsen, yes.
Ah, is that a Dutch name, I hear?
There is a Dutch heritage involved, yes,
Yeah?
indeed, yeah.
So you think this is where the 2 lads were dropped off?
I'm pretty certain
Yeah.
this is where the 2 lads
It doesn't
were
look
dropped off.
very nice water to drink,
No,
does
but
it?
this is probably what it looked like on that day
Yeah.
in 1629. The
Yeah.
river is fairly low, again, very salty and stagnant almost at this part of the river, but higher up there's springs, there's still
Yeah.
a bit of inflow coming in.
So it might be
the
better
wa-
upstream.
Yeah, the water was better upstream.
Do you think they could have possibly survived without the Aboriginals' help?
With great difficulty. They were very explicitly told to try and make friends with the Aboriginal people in
How
this
did
area.
they know they were Aboriginals here?
Because even though the Aboriginal people wouldn't show themselves, that they knew they were here because they kept lighting fires in the district, which
okay.
was a means of signalling to each other
Oh, right.
that something was going on. And so they already knew that there was Aboriginal people in this
Right.
area. They just hadn't actually met up with them or sighted them.
With the help of the Nanda tribe, the stranded sailors might have survived. After that, the birth of the first Dutch Aboriginal baby was only a matter of time. These Aboriginals all claim to have Dutch ancestry. They claim to be the distant offspring of the Dutch sailors who were washed ashore in the 17th century. Clayton Drage is a Nanda. He takes Sarah to an old sheep farm where for many years he used to live and work with his family. This, they say, is their land. The only problem is there's nothing to prove that in writing, because the Aboriginals didn't know the term property.
As far as the eye can see is your traditional land, is it? So it's a massive piece of land.
As far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
Now,
As soon as they can prove that it was they who helped the castaways and showed them where to find food and water in this arid land, they will have the evidence to establish that they were already living here in the 17th century.
So we can't drink that because that's salty water, right? But this is fresh water, is it?
At sunset, a party of a score of the black Aborigines passed by, each carrying, in their accustomed manner, a bundle of spears and other weapons. By giving a leading young man a shilling, they were easily detained and threw their spears for my amusement. In their own arts, they are admirable. A cap being fixed at 30 yards distance, they transfixed it with a spear, delivered by the throwing stick, with the rapidity of an arrow from the bow of a practiced archer. In tracking animals or men, they show most wonderful sagacity. They will not, however, cultivate the ground, or build houses and remain stationary, or even take the trouble of tending a flock of sheep when given to them. When the English colonizers arrived, they immediately took possession of the land. They created farms with fences, and the Aboriginals were chased off their own lands. Thanks to the Native Title Act, a law that is meant to help Aboriginals reclaim their rights to land, during the 90s, a number of them were indeed awarded some of their hectares back. William Mallard is an Aboriginal. In the beginning of the 80s, his family squatted on this piece of land in an area that used to belong to their ancestors.
This is the traditional land of my dad. Very difficult. The process of actually living here and coming here was extreme. You were fighting not only the white farmers who didn't want you in the area, you were fighting the local government, you were fighting the state government, you were also fighting the federal government, because at that time it was uncool to be Aboriginal. And those who wanted to be Aboriginals were always the lowest of the low.
How did the neighbours react when you moved in here?
Extreme. Tied the gates up with barbed wire, shot at us when we were camping here, ostracised us in the shops.
I was standing in a shop waiting to get served, okay? And this happened to be not too long ago. And a white lady came along and she came behind me. That girl at the counter would go to that white lady before she had come to me. And I said to her, I was here before that lady. I said, excuse me dear, I said, I was here before that lady. She never said nothing back to me.
If you're white, you're all right. And if you're brown, you can hang around. But if you're black, you stand back. And that's it.
A lot of people say that we're just scum of the country. And I've heard that said it plenty of times.
Everywhere in Australia, Aboriginals are being allocated land. The possibility of having Dutch ancestry has raised expectations for the Drage family.
Hello?
Is that you, Tom?
The question is, how do you prove that you are a descendant of a maroon sailor that came ashore here in the 17th century? The magic word is again DNA.
What I do is, if you just put it in your mouth inside your cheek just a couple of times. There you are, mate. That's wonderful, thank you.
The Mallards have received their share of land thanks to the Native Title Act that was set up to right the wrongs that were done. But the Native Title Act has not been an unmixed blessing. That Western concept called property has also brought jealousy and greed.
When native title came about, it was manipulated for those who can get what they could and ever they could out of it. And they broke up the family structures by creating different factions of supporting. Whoever got in first, whoever dived into the water first and got the fish, ate the fish. The whole lot of the fish.
We still await the DNA results, which will tell us which kind of white skin they have. Dutch skin is more desirable because the Dutch arrived here much earlier than the English. It would prove these Aboriginals' connection to the land before the British. But isn't it extraordinary that a people who have lived on this land for 60,000 years have to prove their entitlement via two shipwrecked white sailors? And this is how we leave the arid continent behind us, just like Charles Darwin, to start the long crossing of the Indian Ocean.
Farewell, Australia. You're a rising child, and doubtless someday will reign a great princess in the south. But you're too great and ambitious for affection, yet not great enough for respect. I leave your shores without sorrow or regret. Everybody's afraid of the depths, the ocean depths. There used to be a metaphor for our own unconscious, but in a way it is for a much greater unconscious, because beneath the bottom of the deep sea lie the Earth's memories, intact, layer upon layer, undisturbed, and we can recover them with deep ocean drilling. And we can say without any doubt, really accurately, exactly what the climate was when. Wonderful because it may give us a chance to predict what will happen to us when the climate changes, as it inevitably will.
In the debate over climate change, the divide between fact and opinion has been lost. I reread Darwin on his notions about facts and opinions. False facts are highly injurious to the progress of science, for they often long endure. But false views, if supported by some evidence, do little harm, as everyone takes a salutary pleasure in proving their falseness. Climate science has received lots of criticism since mistakes were discovered in the report of the International Panel concerned with climate change. a climate team joined the Clipper to find better answers. I am curious, how far and how fast is the climate changing? And if it is changing, how much time does mankind have left to find solutions to the problem?
We do that every day. Measure the humidity and the temperature of the water and the salinity. But I'm still confused. What is the difference between weather and climate?
Climate works on a 30-year average of all the weather data, so that makes the confusion.
In order to study climate change around the world, we need historical weather data, and also from places in the middle of the oceans.
Look around you, that's thousands of kilometers where we do not have any data whatsoever. And that's why we're going to this small atoll, which is in the middle of nowhere. But it holds in the corals, it holds the clue to climate change, because every year there's a little layer building up, and that makes the record over a couple of 100 years. And it's like a natural weather station.
Yeah,
so that's why we've got to go there.
That's ingenious.
Cocos Keeling is the only place in the vast Indian Ocean where accurate climate facts are hidden, in the coral. By chance, it is also the place where Charles Darwin strolled in 1836 to study coral reefs. Our scientists are searching for the largest coral mound, which is supposed to show the highest number of age rings. There's a risk that there might not be such a large coral mound at all. If we want to look back in time to when Darwin was here, 174 years ago, the coral mass has to be at least 2 to 3 meters high.
How deep is it around here?
2.
Oh, so I think it's better to just move on, because I think it's too shallow.
Coral in the shape of a cauliflower is not good because it grows in an irregular way. We really need a sphere of a coral in which you can pass through time steadily and uninterrupted.
Okay.
But then after a lot of moving and looking around, the scientists find the desired shape. After 2 days of drilling, the climate scientists can start counting the age rings found in the coral reef. They make a first assessment to see whether they reach the year that Darwin was here. Can they tell if he was here in a wet or a dry period?
78, 77. Kijk, hier heb je een rare met 2 van die dingetjes ertussen.
Het zou wel eens een El Niño-jaar kunnen zijn.
Precies. 54, 53, 52.
Eentje terug.
Nou, is Darwin. Huh? Yep. Kijk, dus we hebben hem.
Net aan.
Al een jaar af, zo ongeveer.
Dit rondje, dat is het.
Dit is hem. Ja, dit is hem. Geweldig. Geweldig.
Hoe groot is die kans?
Well, so this is it, huh?
This is our treasure trove. Yeah, now we have to puzzle. This is the top, so this is 2009.
Yeah.
But this was taken very close to the site where Darwin actually landed on the island.
You've got to have the age first, but that's not what you're primarily interested in, is it? You want to know how much CO2 there was in the atmosphere?
We should be able to tell that pretty exactly, yes.
Funny.
Small samples of coral are chemically analysed. This is how one can measure the yearly seawater temperatures dating back 200 years. It soon becomes clear that this is exceptional data. It's exciting to handle physical evidence of the weather of the past and to find out what the results of this research will teach us about climate change. Meanwhile, on deck, I'm being shown that my life amounts to the flick of a butterfly's wing when compared to the total time of life on Earth.
It's quite a climb. Let's use this rope as a measure of time. Let's call this the moment of Darwin.
Oh, great.
Which is already like 200 years ago, but still. So let's make that now. It's that story on the corals, that happens in the first fiber of history, or the first fiber of the rope. And then actually, what I'm doing, also drilling in the ocean floors, is to get records that go back like millions and millions and millions of years.
Whoa.
First northern hemisphere ice. That's where the first apes begin to stand up. They basically somewhat begin here, and then they dwizzle, and then somewhere...
Become Darwin.
Somewhere here, our species first appears. And let's call this knot the first ice on Antarctica. This is that moment, the past 34 million years, where the Earth for the first time goes from a very warm greenhouse phase into the icehouse phase. When we go down record, that it gets warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer, and that somewhere around here, this is that moment where we have the, let's say, greatest warmth. So let's call this super warmth, 51 million years ago. That is the warmest moment of the past 80 million years.
How warm was that?
Well, this is when we have palm trees on the North Pole.
Palm trees on the North Pole?
Palm trees, crocodiles, tropical plankton, all roaming around on the North Pole.
So what insights into climate change have the results of drilling on Antarctica and Cocos Keeling given us so far? The climate scientists draw a chart on the deck indicating the most important findings. The white line shows the progression of CO2 levels in the atmosphere. The red line indicates the average temperature that accompanies those levels. The graph starts at 50 million years ago, when CO2 levels were far higher than today, 3,000 units as against the current 280. And the average temperature on Earth declined from 34 to 12 degrees Celsius.
Je ziet voortdurend, en nu ook in Antarctica, dat op dit soort lange tijdschalen er gewoon hand in hand CO2, temperatuur, die doen samen een soort wandeling. En als de CO2 daalt, dan wordt het ook kouder op aarde. En als je CO2 weer omhoog gooit, dan wordt het weer warmer.
So now what happens to the levels of CO2 and the temperature on Earth? Our researchers draw a chart indicating their predictions for the next 200 years.
So actually we rise from 396 in 2010 towards 1500 CO2 in 2100. And if we continue that trend, actually, we look at the year 2200, we actually end up with a CO2 of 2500. And that's something we haven't seen for a very, very long time.
It's really totally fascinating to see that these values are the same that I drew from the planet 50 million years ago when there were these palms on the North Pole.
Henk is clear. We humans are the cause of global warming. What will happen if we don't do anything? If we keep on burning our oil and gas reserves and chopping down our rainforests? Keep on maltreating our fellow humans? Can we outwit extinction by playing with genes, or replace life as we know it with robots? And would that be really smart? It's obviously true that we must adapt, because if not, we die. But how great will the adaptation have to be? Is imminent extinction not part of everything Darwin is still teaching us? Or are we as humans smarter than anything else in this universe? Are we the exception to the rule of evolution? Time will tell.